Now, our guest today is the brilliant Sakai Machache. Sakai is a Zimbabwean Scottish visual artist and curator based in Glasgow. She is the recipient of the 2020 RSA Morton Award and is an artist in residence with the Talbot Rice Residency Program from 2021 to 2023. Sakai's short film, Profound Divine Sky, was shot at Forest Sinard in the Flow country of the Scottish Highlands and will form the central focus of our discussion today. Welcome, Sakai.
Hi, and thank you so much for a really beautiful introduction. That was really, really nice. And thanks for the opportunity to be here to speak today. I'm going to talk about the Divine Sky quickly, just to kind of give a general idea of like the ways in which my practice engages with landscape. So at the beginning of the first lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic, I sort of started to really think about, I'd been thinking for quite a long time around how to engage with engage my practice in ways where I was able to showcase the range of work that I do. So for quite a long time, I've been a photographer and I've been making work that that really is a performance to camera. So usually using myself as the model, performing to the camera for photographic work. And I wanted to sort of show the range of work that I actually make. And so the Divine Sky was the first opportunity for me to kind of like play with lots of different concepts and also play with lots of different mediums as well. So the sort of general information for the project is that it kind of weaves lots of different forms of storytelling together. And this is like the sort of paragraph I tend to use to explain the project. So the Divine Sky utilizes allegory and performance to tell a complicated history through poesis, immersive storytelling, and photography. And this work denotes a process of inscribing and reinscribing thought through automatic drawing with ink on paper, indigo pigment on fabric, performance to camera, layering and overlaying. I started off making blue ink drawings, which for the vast amount of my projects, I do sort of start with a color. And I engage with that color for quite some time before I even start to make the work. Usually it kind of comes to me in what is called synchronicities, where I start to notice the color showing up in lots of different places. So the first time I noticed that this was something that happened in my life was when I was a child, and I used to think that I just had a favorite color, but it would kind of rotate and become a different color each, like not even every year, but like every couple of months I would start to shift into wearing a lot of red, and all of the things that I wanted around me were red. And then after a while I would shift into wearing blue and everything around me was blue. And then the same thing would happen with green. And I did that quite a lot as a kid. But then as I grew up, I started to realize that this was something that was quite interesting, and that I could, like, as an artist, sort of start to kind of like work with that, my need to kind of shift my whole life with color. So I started off making a lot of work with red, which I might be able to show you a little bit later if we've got time. But I'll stick to the blue work just now because that's what I've been working on for the most recently. So I started with blue ink drawings, and they're really just started off with marbling and just drawing back into that marbling work with pen and ink. And they sort of helped me to think through my ideas, because a lot of my work kind of comes from dreams and from whenever I'm meditating or having kind of time to just like be quiet and think and focus and be out in nature. I kind of get a lot of I get a lot of inspiration from all of those things, and then I kind of pull that together into these drawings, which are kind of done through an automatic drawing process. I then developed those drawings into some fabric work where I was using indigo pigments that come from Morocco. And indigo blocks that come from Morocco. I was grinding them down in a mortar and pestle mortar, and then I would add vinegar to them, and then I would just use use sumi brushes to paint directly onto the fabric. This technique was kind of, I don't know, I didn't realize that people don't usually dye like this. They usually obviously would dip the work into the fabric into a dye vat. So I started off doing this and almost like just to test things out to see what I could do with indigo. And then I started working on batik work where I did make some indigo dye vats and made a series of work with batik as well. Similar sort of concept to the ink drawings. It's just really anything that inspired me from taking walks or reading or like just being out in nature in general would kind of go back into the fabrics. And then later after that, I started to kind of think about how I could, because I couldn't go outside for a very long time, how I could bring the outside inside. And so I created a backdrop using the fabric that I'd painted. And that was then standing in for the landscape that I wasn't able to actually enter at that point. And the ink drawings, as you can see, are also inside this sort of like spherical object that I'm holding. And this work was really thinking about how when you are dealing with a lot of overlapping and conflicting thoughts, especially as someone who has ADHD, I kind of have a lot of like fast thoughts, like everything's kind of always rolling together really quickly. And so I wanted to represent that in some way with the ink drawings, some of them being more densely patterned and some a little bit more fluid and a little bit more floating and flowing. So I created the three discs with ink drawings to kind of represent when you are meditating, what happens to all those thoughts and all of that that fast moving energy, how you, when you breathe and you slow it down, it can become this really peaceful and sort of serene space. This is an image of the work when it was shown at Stills in Edinburgh last year when I had my solo exhibition there, Projects 20. And after having made, I think about 10 meters of fabric with indigo dye and with the batik work, I actually handed that over to a really amazing friend who is called Fiona Catherine Powell, and she and I worked together to design this this dress, which is one of the main features of the Divine Sky project. It's titled Blue of the Horizon, and it's a sort of period style dress, but it's got its own sort of kind of almost like its own world inside of it, because it's taken on the materiality of the landscape that I'd kind of drawn out in the original photography work. And it's got cowrie shells on the sleeves, which was a really nice addition from Fiona. When I move in the dress, it kind of makes the sound of almost like water, like falling or rain. So it's got all of these really beautiful elements where it takes elements and inspiration from nature, and then it kind of has its own life really. Whenever I wear it, I feel like it's kind of choosing how I move or helping me to decide what my movements are. And in this is the dress in full at the exhibition as well. The next body of work that I made after the initial photographic work, this was in the second lockdown, was titled A Hint of Blue, and this series was taking that fabric and kind of placing it, making it a tablecloth for a kind of still lifestyle image. And I took some blue willow china, which I got lots of like different variations of it from all around the world, because blue willow china is like famously really beautiful, very a really beautiful traditional art form, but it's been kind of through the sort of process of like of years and years of kind of colonial extraction, it's become this quite cheap commodity that you can buy in job lots on eBay. So I started buying job lots of porcelain, and I basically placed some pieces onto the table. And then I kind of wanted to create this sense of ritual practice within the piece as well. So a lot of the elements that you can see here, if you're aware of what they might be representing, are kind of sort of putting forward this idea of ritual in a domestic space. It's another image from the series as well. And these are the pieces when they were shown at stills. And so later on in the year, when I was actually at the Flow Country doing the film work for my film, The Profound Divine Sky, we also took some photographic images as well to kind of, so that we had some photographic documentation of the show, of the filmmaking. And they kind of represent what the film actually looks like as well. As you can see, the landscape that I finally got to go out into the landscape, and this image is from the Flow Country in Sutherland. As you can see from the images, there's reflections of myself in the pools, at the bog pools in Forcenard at the Flow Country, and I really wanted to kind of represent the sky and also water at the same time, and sort of combine all of the different elements that made the research and the development of the Divine Sky project kind of come together. And the images kind of follow the sort of the flow of the film, which moves from day to night, and you sort of see the range of colors of the sky, and you see the reflections in the pools as well. And this was the first thing that kind of got me interested in working with this landscape in the first place. I think one of the most significant aspects of this project is how I was able to kind of like engage with historical concepts, storytelling, multiple forms of media, and pull them all together to bring sort of awareness to our relationship to land, but also our relationship to the environment as well. So I think that that's something that I feel is a very spiritual thing as well. If you have a relationship to the land, then you have a spiritual experience whenever you're in nature. These final images kind of just show kind of how the film ends in this kind of relationship to the colors, the color blue, and sorry, I'm really struggling today, but if anybody has any questions, then please feel free.
Thank you, Sakai. That was wonderful. The still images are just so exquisite, and I know because I've seen Profound Divine Sky, your film, that it's just as stunning. And I should tell everyone who's attending that we're hoping at some point to be able to do a screening, whether in person or live online, of the film. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, we have lots of questions for you. Anne and I at least do, and I hope that some of our audience members do as well. And so I encourage all of you to put questions in the Q&A, and we'll look out for those. But first, I guess I know a little bit about the context that this project emerged out of, and you touched on it a little bit by saying that you sort of were not able to get out into the landscape, and then suddenly you were. So do you want to talk a little bit about why that was the case?
Yeah, it was just, lockdown. We weren't able to go anywhere, were we? And I don't drive, so I just wasn't able to get out. And I spent a long time. Most of the time that I was making this project was in lockdown. So it was always this like dream of, will we ever get to go to this place? And I had some really amazing friends and some people who worked at the conservation project at the Full Country, who went out and took photographs for me and like gave me lots of like pointers about like where to go, where would be best to film. They also supported us with like, you know, just general information about the area. So I had this understanding of where I was going, and I hope that I would be out of lockdown in time to be able to actually make the film. So it was touch and go for a whole year. So I'm really glad that we got to go. And I'm actually, interestingly, I've been staying in Helmsdale for the last couple of days as well. So I'm in Skye just now for a couple of days, and then we're going to go back to Helmsdale. And I've actually got a talk on Friday at Timespan because we've got an exhibition there. So there's been a kind of an opportunity to share the film in the place where, or nearabouts the place where it was filmed. So it's really exciting.
Thank you so much for your talk. I thought it was really brilliant. And so I guess sort of in the context of energy ethics, something that we've been thinking about is all the different ways in which, energy can be explored through art, especially within the context of our central themes. Mm-hmm. And you've just sort of mentioned, the way in which, what it meant to you to finally be able to go up north, and, that you couldn't go earlier because, you weren't driving. And so maybe you can just very briefly reflect upon how, I guess, like certain modes of transportation that are determined by the landscape up north, that's quite different to the ones here, and sort of the infrastructure is very different as well, how that, I guess, influences maybe your experience of the place.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I've been speaking to locals in Skye, and they've been saying, like, if you come up here, you need to drive. There's no other way once you're on the island to really get around. Some people, I met a man earlier on today who is a cyclist who has cycled. He's come from New Orleans with a bike, and he's been cycling all around Scotland and all around the UK. So like just people who find ways to limit their like kind of contribution to the environmental issues that we're facing. Like I keep meeting more and more people who are thinking about, okay, I have to technically fly from America to get to Scotland, but could I just cycle around the whole place and see as much as possible and meet people and have encounters with them and things like that. So I think I've met people that have lots of different views on it. Like in Skye, they're just like, if you need to do your shopping, if you need to get around, this is what you need to do. And as an artist, we usually have a lot of kit. We're like carrying lots of things to try and make, especially with photography and film, we've got a lot of things to carry around. So driving is really like the only way. When we went up to Helmsdale, we did have one car for the videographer and his assistant, and all of their kit and all of the things that we needed to drag all of that stuff onto the pools. And then we also had another car driving us up with the costumes and all the other things that had to be brought up as well. So I think that there's not really a way around driving and around kind of being in these spaces. You've kind of got to do that. And I think that's just to do with like resources and energy as well that we kind of expend. But then there's nowhere else that you can get those beautiful views, those beautiful landscapes. You've got to come up to the Highlands to really see that and experience it.
Absolutely. And I think it's part of that interesting dichotomy, I suppose, of really requiring a car to go up north, but then when you're in the space, I guess, like a lot of people walk, or you spoke about like meditation earlier, to sort of tame maybe wild energies or conflicting thoughts and all that. So I think that's really interesting. Thank you.
Or you could take a dip in the fairy pools. That's also another way, which I did yesterday. It was very nice. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, and Sakai, I wonder, following on from that, if you want to talk a bit more about how you think about energy in a meditative or spiritual sense, because you're interested in African folklore and metaphysics. And I also would love for you to share a little bit about your early life and kind of how, because you moved to Scotland at such a young age, how you sort of keep hold of your ties, and how that informs your practice?
Yeah, I think for me, the concept of energy in relation to spirituality is really significant, especially um, I think about everything in relation to the mind, the body, and think about like emotions. So it's like psychological, spiritual, physical, and all of those different sort of layers of what makes you a person. So we expend energy physically with our body, and that affects our mind as much as our mind affects our body as well. So I think that a lot of people who've experienced like issues with mental health will know that it impacts the body, but then it's also can be, a lot of those things can be alleviated when you kind of create a relationship between the two. So people who dance or who use their bodies in their work and performance, and people who even people who practice like yoga and these sort of practices, they find that their kind of their relationship to stress and to the things that can often cause physiological issues like kind of start to decrease. And for me, I've been meditating every single morning for years and years and years, and that's affected my relationship to anxiety and depression quite significantly. I feel like for me, as long as I have enough time and space to be able to like recede into myself and spend time with myself, call it going into hermit mode. If I can get enough hermit mode time, then I can do everything else. And I feel that like a lot of the time we're kind of forced to be in social settings, or we're forced to be out in the world working and the things that we have to do to survive in the world. And during the lockdowns, what I found was that I was actually able to almost manage a lot of my things better, a lot of my sort of issues around mental health and things like that a lot better, because I was in my own space for such a long time. I was able to make more artwork. I was able to read more. I was able to do all the things that give me nourishment and that allow me to sort of feel energized and re-energized. But I also feel energized by being around people, and I feel energized by travel and being, going out into nature as well. So you have to kind of strike a balance between that. And I think in terms of my background, I was born in Zimbabwe. I'm from Southern Africa. And we have rich spiritual practices there, but they've been diminished and kind of demonized for quite a long time through the colonial project. So there's a lot of people, even in my own culture, who just don't engage with any of those things because they've been colonized and indoctrinated into other spiritual practices we don't need to name. And so it's this thing of like, how do you reclaim aspects of yourself when actually you don't have access to that even back home? So for me, strangely, I had a lot of very interesting dreams since I was a very small child, and my dreams became so vivid and so spectacular and imaginative that I was able to kind of draw from them to make art and to write stories. And I found out through my research that in my culture, in the Shona culture, the people who practice healing and who practice herbalism and all of these kind of spiritual kind of practices are dreamers first. They start off as people who dream, and they dream vividly, and they dream and they have prophetic dreams and all that kind of thing as well. So it's something that's very, very part of my culture and part of my ancestry, and I kind of managed to somehow tap into. I somehow managed to tap into because of art, because of my relationship to art, and then found out later, oh, that's actually what my ancestors have been doing for thousands and thousands of years. And you can still find people who practice in this way in Zimbabwe and other parts of Southern Africa. But like I say, it's not something that's easily accessible because of the sort of demonizing of the spiritual practices. So I found my way back to something that I probably wouldn't have if I was even living in Zimbabwe, by sort of being here in Scotland and having access to, and deciding also to look at it through my art practice.
Well, some excellent questions have come into the Q&A, so I'll go through those now. The first one is from Yarrow Magdalena, and they have some lovely comments to share. They say, these images are really, really touching to see. Thank you. I would love to hear about practices that feel spiritually nourishing to you. And you've shared a bit about this already, but if you want to add more. They also say, I know being in a state of openness and enchantment is kind of needed to make art with depth, but they're finding it hard sometimes to stay in touch with it day to day.
Yeah, I totally get you there. It's really difficult to find that that kind of space. I think it's also about how much time we spend doing other things to kind of keep ourselves going. That makes it hard to find those moments where you can actually be engaged and find nourishing ways of replenishing your own energies. I would say that I tend to just do the same sort of routines in relation to like my spiritual practice. I have what we call spiritual baths. For example, I make jokes all the time about how I just like to take baths, but actually I'm taking like baths that are very specific, and it's using like certain herbs and also just kind of like the salts and the herbs and the you've got to put your candles on, you've got to do your incense, you've got to smudge the space, you've got to kind of like set intentions, all of those things, and you go in to the bath with intention, whether it's to cleanse and to remove the sort of like the stress of the day, or if it's to try and replenish your energies and make you ready to do something. So I kind of I do that quite a lot. If you have a bath at home, obviously, if you don't have access to the bath, you can do spiritual showers. They do exist as well. This is something that you can look up online, and it's very easy to access. These days, there's a lot of spiritual information out there. I work with tarot quite a lot as well. I've made a few images for what I'm trying to make a tarot deck, but it's obviously going to be a very slow endeavor, probably something that I'll do for the rest of my life because it's a lot of cards to make. I've only made 3 at the moment. I've made the Hierophant, the High Priestess, and Temperance, and I did so that I've basically I'm slowly getting there with the major arcana, at least. If anybody knows about tarot, then they'll know what I mean, but generally it's something that I practice quite regularly, especially when I'm doing my sort of journals, and after a meditation I might pull a few cards for myself and then use the cards to kind of set up my day and set intentions for the day.
Great. Well, Grace says such a beautiful project and asks, they say, I'd love to know how you felt specifically filming and moving in the Flow Country landscape.
Filming in the Flow Country was absolutely incredible. We were so blessed to have been given like three straight days of just sunlight the whole time. And we went there in, I think it was end of April, start of May. It's quite rare to get that much time without it raining. So we were really lucky with the light. The whole process of making the film, we really wanted to get the night going into the day, and all the different colors of blue that you see in the sky as that shifts. And I remember, going back to the dress, that I had a corset on under the dress, and then the actual structure of the dress itself and the flow of it and the way that the sleeves sort of like made this beautiful noise, it just really informed my movements, which I had to move slowly. I had to move carefully as well to make sure that aspects of the outfit was able to kind of like turn around and move around itself. And I, at the time, I only had a few gestures that I wanted to put forward, which is to do with like collecting water, blessing water, and then pouring the water back into the pools. And it was like this repetitive ritual that I was doing at the pools. So when I wasn't making the gestures with dance, I was also kind of returning the water to the water and blessing it as well. I don't know if that answered the question. But,
And
yeah.
Ted and Morag both had a question about how you arrived at the Flow Country being your choice of venue to combine with the other elements of the work to shoot this film in.
Mhm. I remember the first thought that I had was I want to reflect the sky in the water. And yeah, I had been thinking a lot and working a lot with water through my marbling pieces, because you basically just use marbling inks and water to make those works. It kind of creates like almost like a relief print, and then I draw back into them. So the first thing I was working with is I kind of used this idea of collaborating with water for the ink drawings. So that was where that started. And so I wanted to have water be significantly involved through the project. I'm also referencing a goddess or Orisha from the Yoruba pantheon called Yamoya, who is the goddess of the oceans. So there's this kind of correlation with water quite deeply in the project. So I wanted to have this reflection, and that just was like, where are bodies of water that are still, like always still? Where could I be at a place where I'm not going to have any issues with like currents or anything like that? And then my friend Vanilla, who lives up in Helmsdale, was like, hey, like, what about the bog pools? And I was like, tell me more. And then she started telling me about the conservation project near Helmsdale called the Flow Country. And I looked on their website and fell madly in love with the landscape and just thought, yeah, this is where I'm going. But that was in January 2020. So yeah, that's what I mean by it took a whole year to make the film.
And Janita has a really excellent contribution, which I'm going to just read out. So they say, your images are stunning. The marsh landscape as an estuarine intertidal space, a space that changes almost every second. They say, I live close to the marshes in Essex and know the landscape well. Estuaries are used for energy production for our electricity. But the marshes themselves are always full of energy, of the tides, the wind, the sea, and our moving in it. I am an artist working with the cyanotype, and the color blue is hidden and prominent in the marshes at all times. I feel you create a drama in the landscape with the dress and the positions you take. Can you tell me a little more about your energy and inspiration, which is also an energy, and the natural energy of this landscape?
Wow, that was really beautiful. I'm thinking about energy in terms of like the way that I approach making is usually kind of like it's quite sporadic. It's all over the place, and I like to pull from so many different places in the research and in the development of it as well. And it also involves so many other people. Like there's so many collaborative projects and there's so much going on before we ever get to the point of actually making what it is that we're going to make. So I think that it's that collective energy as well, the bringing together of people, the invitation as well. Like how do you kind of like offer people the opportunity to be involved in something like that they don't know anything about yet, and that you kind of, I feel that my job is to try and inspire the other person to be excited about it, so that we're working together. I've been talking about being in collusion with one another while you're collaborating, because you want people to actually care about what it is that they're involved in. I don't like to be in situations where I don't know whether people understand what it is I'm trying to say with the work. And I really struggle sometimes with getting it from here out on paper or out to other people, especially when it's still kind of forming as well. And I think a lot of my time is spent forming and formulating ideas. I feel like I come up with ideas constantly, but how do I get it from there to the finished point is usually involving a lot of other players, other movers, other people who have skills and abilities that I don't, and that I admire as well. So I think that, yeah, none of us do any of this on our own. And when we do, it's usually to our detriment, and that's again to do with energy. Like how can you do all of it by yourself? I used to do it all by myself before, and I would experience burnout year on year, and I'm still experiencing burnout now, even with all the support I have. So I think this is something that we all have to be cognizant of, like what limits are we willing to push ourselves to, basically. And I hope I didn't answer that beautiful question with a sad response, but yeah.
That's lovely. And Diane has just such a fascinating question, which is, does your art feed back into your dreams? For example, the feel of wearing the dress in the flow country. So is it kind of like, art imitating dreams, imitating art? I guess is the question.
That's a great question, because it's funny, the way that my dreams work is, and the way that I bring the dreams into the work isn't what people think. It's not like I don't see any of that stuff in the dreams and then make the work like almost illustrating what's in a dream. It's more, I have a feeling in a dream space, and I actually have places that I go to in my dreams, like as in the same place over and over and over again, and I experience similar experiences with similar characters or players within the dreams as well. So there's a kind of way that I kind of pull the sensation or the idea or the concept that the dream was trying to express into the artwork. And so when it feeds back, I think it is just like anything in life. Like you're going back to the same. You walk down the same street every day to get home, and maybe there's a tree there that you always see, and that's always coming into your mind or something like that. It's like I imagine that when I do dream, that my work is feeding into the dreams, and that my dreams are feeding into my life, like in any way, really. And because they're so vivid, I'll have like I'll see a blue dragonfly in my dream, and then I'll wake up and I'll look up the symbolism of blue dragonflies, and then for the next 3 weeks I'll see blue dragonflies everywhere. It's that kind of way that it creates synchronicities for me that then end up in my work, and it probably does go the other way. I just don't know how to describe whether that's happening. I think the movement of the dress was it could be because I fly a lot in my dreams, and I feel like there's something that was like because the dress was so massive, it was so expansive, the train of it was so long, and there were points where when I was walking it was like floating behind me, and I was like, oh wow, that would be amazing if I was like floating along the peat bogs. But yeah, so sometimes I think about that, like I fly every single time I remember I'm dreaming. When I get a lucid dream, I'm like, oh, time to fly. And I just enjoy that most nights.
I would maybe have one more question for you. So I think recently there's been more and more artists who have also focused on different types of wetlands and peatland swarms and so on, which I guess they play really important roles within climate change and ecological conservation. And I was just wondering if maybe you wanted to say a few words about that as well. And I guess also considering that many wetlands have a very sort of special soil that decomposes different to other types of soil and sort of contains much elements sort of from the past. I don't know, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that strangely there was like a synergy between like what the landscape does, like what the peat bogs do, and what my work was already kind of doing, which was it was like I was doing a lot of relief work, like with the batik and with the ink drawings. It was a kind of this, and I was supposed to be doing a lot of cyanotypes as well for the project, but I never got around to them. I'll remind myself I need to go back to do the cyanotypes for the rest of the Divine Sky. But it's something about leaving an impression or leaving traces. I think what you were saying about there's something inside there that's been maybe there for like millions of years, and then there's also more carbon being absorbed and taken out of our atmosphere, which is exactly what we we need right now. So we need those landscapes to be preserved, and that's why like the Flow Country exists in the way that it does, and the conservation project at Forcenard, which is doing such incredible work. So I think about how we kind of almost what we've been doing for such a long time is extracting from the landscape in order to get what we need, to get the energy that we need so that we can like sustain our system. And then in a way we're asking the landscape to like fix it for us. In a way it's like plant more trees now because we ripped so many from the ground. Like preserve these landscapes that absorb carbon more because we've made this problem. And I think it is working with nature that is going to get us out of this, and not asking of nature anymore, and really doing the work to make sure that what we're doing is less of the destructive processes and more of like what can be done to restore and to replenish. And I think as artists, our significant role is to inspire people to that. So yeah, I think it's amazing that there's lots of other artists that are engaging with these landscapes, engaging with environmental issues in their work, and there's also times when we're not really necessarily, as any industry in the world at the moment, we also are complicit in the issues, because we to transport work to art festivals, art fairs, like there's a lot of energy there. There's I was also involved with NFTs for a while as well. There's like a thing around like, how do we bring ourselves back from that space of adding to the problem, and maybe by making images and making work that relates to these subjects, to inspire others, but then also thinking about how can we be more sustainable in our own practices as well. So yeah, working with recyclable materials and things like that makes like a lot of sense as well, and trying to fly less, but I'm quite into traveling for inspiration, so I don't know how to do that. But yeah, I think we all just need to do our little incremental bits to support in making the situation better rather than worse.
I thought that was very well said. That was really beautifully put. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sakai. I think that we've all felt so moved by your work and just the way that you sort of live and practice. And so I think a fitting way to close today would be to just ask you about your upcoming projects. What are you working on now, and how can we all follow along and support you as you keep going?
Yeah, so I gave myself the task of making 12 pieces for the Divine Sky project, and I'm almost finished. I've just remembered I need to make cyanotypes, so now I know what I'm making for one of the other ones. The next couple are going to be performance work. So I've got a performance at Buzzcut at the CCA on the 21st of September, and there's a whole night of amazing performances there that evening. And I'm going to be performing Azure Blue, which is one of the 12 titles for the Divine Sky projects are actually all taken from the indigo dye practices from Mali. It's an ancient practice from Mali, where they would dip the fabric 12 times to get the darkest shades. So the first dip gives you the lightest shades of blue, and then the darkest ones are all called the Divine Sky. So that's light Divine Sky, deep Divine Sky, profound Divine Sky. So that's why that project is called that. Probably should have started with that. Yeah, so I'm making the performance piece called Azure Blue, which I recently started to kind of develop through a commission from Xmuse vodka brand with Jupiter Artland a few months ago. And then I'm going to be developing that further. I'm kind of trying to expand it and create something that is engaging both with with poetry, specifically poetry of Sappho, and also wearing the Blue of the Horizon dress for that body of work. And then I've also got a few other pieces which are sculptural that I'm working on for the Divine Sky project. And then beyond that, I'm doing a whole lot of preparation. Like I'm in research and development for several film projects, large scale pieces, and also curatorial projects as well. So I can't speak too much about them because they're so early in their development. But at the moment, there's a lot going on. Let's just say. So yeah, I guess watch this space. Maybe in like a year, things will start becoming a bit more easy for me to speak about because there'll be more concrete information about them. But right now, I'm just trying to get the Divine Sky finished and like make sure that I make all 12, so I can be proud of myself that I've done something and finished something. But yeah.